Good morning, friend. Erin Chase here from $5 Dinners, and we're doing a bit of an impromptu sort of situation here. Oh my goodness, this pinned comment, I'm going to unpin that, and we're going to try and delete it. Okay, good morning. Homemade pie crust. I'm going to drop the link in the comments. We're going to make this here. This is kind of impromptu. I wasn't planning on this. I'm planning on making a pie with you later this afternoon, but last night I was making a homemade pie and I was like, oh, there's so many little tricks and tips to this. So if you've never made homemade pie crust, watch this. It's just gonna be a couple of minutes. I'm just making the crust. We're gonna make the pie later today, but I just wanted to share a couple of really important hacks with you and kind of explain a little bit of the science of it all, because it's really important. If you've never made one, watch this. It's only gonna be a couple of minutes. So I'm just gonna jump right in and get started. So here is what we need. Let me give you a breakdown of what we're gonna do. We're gonna do 1 1/3. This is gonna make a single pie crust, so just like the bottom of a pumpkin pie. If you need a double for like an apple pie or something like that, you're gonna wanna go ahead and double this recipe. So this is gonna make a single crust. So we're gonna do 1 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour. So let me do that. I haven't transferred this to my flour bin yet. And then I'm gonna share a couple of my favorite tools with you. I want you to check out the recipe that's in the comments. It's also at the top of the video. So that is 1 cup plus 1/3 cup. Okay, so there's the flour. The next thing that we're going to add is 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I am going to combine that together with my pastry blender. You can do the butter cutting and the flour in like a food processor or even a blender, but I just find the pastry blender to be easier. It's way easier to clean this bowl than it is to clean all that out of a blender. It doesn't get stuck to the sides. I want to just say I don't recommend that. Okay, the next thing we're gonna need is cold butter. I have seen people use like a microplaner or even like a cheese grater to grate frozen butter. I don't think that's necessary. If you're just using cold butter, that's gonna be fine to do. So what I'm gonna do is cut this into about tablespoon sized pieces. So this is a 1/2 cup of butter. You can also use shortening. That's a whole debate. Shortening or butter, which do you prefer? Which is the flakiest? I'm gonna tell you this, that doesn't matter. This is my opinion. Somebody who's a food scientist might disagree. The fat is what matters. What matters is that everything is cold and that you're gonna add a splash of a secret ingredient here in a second, and I'll show that to you. To get that perfectly flaky crust, what the butter and the shortening, it's fat. That's what you need, it's fat. So I'm gonna just go out on a limb and say it doesn't matter if you use butter or shortening. You might have, the butter's gonna have a little bit of a different flavor profile than the shortening, but as far as how your pie turns out and the flakiness and all that, it's not this. Okay, so I cut that to make this a little bit easier and faster to cut in. I'm gonna use a pastry blender to do that. Again, you could do this in a food processor or a blender, but you leave a lot of this behind if you do it in a food processor or a blender, okay? So we're gonna cut now, and all you do is just press through, and then I'll use that knife to kind of clear out the pastry blender a little bit too. We don't wanna leave really any of this fat behind. So why does everything need to be cold? It needs to be cold because the cold helps the fat and the gluten like meld together, okay? So that's why everything needs to be cold. We're using cold butter. I'm gonna add in ice cold water here in a second. I'm gonna show you how I do that. We're using, and I'm gonna add a splash of cold vinegar, okay? All of that is really important that it's cold, okay? The flakiness is gonna come from the chemical reaction that's happening with the vinegar. It's also gonna come from this, okay? So let me show you the consistency that you're going for here, okay? I know this is hard, it's a white bowl. I'm gonna show you in my hand, hang on. I'm just gonna, I want all this fat in my pie crust, okay? So I'm just doing a little of this. I might do one more cut round, I'll look in a second. So what we're looking for, this is a little bit too big of a piece, okay? That's too much butter, so I need to cut that down. These good, small, crummy pieces are what we want. So that's like a little bits of butter coated in that flour. So we want we want pieces like this. We don't want too large pieces like this. So you're going for like a bit of a crummy mixture, okay? It's a little crummy, but you can see there's a few pieces, like this piece is a little bit too fat. That's a little too much, okay? So that's what we're going for. Get all that back in there. I wanted to show you that, what that was and what the consistency that we're looking for. So let me do one more quick cut round to get a couple of those fatter. The thicker butter pieces are going to contribute to that flakiness, but also so is this vinegar that we're going to add. So those two things are going to help with flakiness. And again, we need everything to be cold so that the fat, in this case butter, you could use shortening also, is going to adhere and kind of form with the flour. Okay, so ready. Rosa. It's my secret ingredient. I'm telling you, it makes a difference. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go we're gonna add 4 to 5 tablespoons of ice cold water. So I'm gonna go add a 1/3 cup of water and 2 ice cubes. I'm gonna use my fridge to do that. My fridge water's already cold, but I'm gonna add ice cubes to it. Hang on. Okay, so this is what I do. Sorry, I'm back. You're like, where'd she go? This is what I do. I measure, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure 4 or 5 tablespoons of ice cold water out of this so that it's like the cold, the fat, the flour, and then I'm gonna add 1 teaspoon of cold vinegar as well. You could use white distilled vinegar or you could use apple cider vinegar. It doesn't matter which of the 2 vinegars that you use, but you want that to be cold. So this is hot out of the refrigerator as well. So again, keeping everything as cold as possible is absolutely crucial to getting that perfect pie crust. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna actually start with the vinegar. And I'm gonna put that, I'm gonna do that directly into the crust. Whoops. And then, give it a little shake in there. Then I'm gonna start with 4 tablespoons of this ice cold water. And then I'm gonna show you a trick for making sure that you have the right amount of water. We don't want it to be too liquidy, but we also don't want it to be dry either. So I'm just going to measure a tablespoon out of this ice cold water. I don't wanna put any ice in there. So if you need to ditch the ice, you can't. It's like, last night I made a double pie crust and I just ditched the ice and then poured the correct amount of water in. But I'm gonna do this way. I think that was 3. Or were y'all counting for me? Oh my gosh. This is what happens when you're on live and you're teaching and talking. I think that was 4. I'll know here in a second. If it's not, we can always add more ice cold water. I added 1 teaspoon of vinegar, Rosa. 1 cold teaspoon. Okay. I'm using a Danish dough whisk. Another thing about a pie crust is you don't want to over knead it. And I really like the Danish dough whisk for how well it gently kneads, if you will. I use it a lot for thicker batters. From like, banana bread's not quite so thick, but I do like to use it for that. Okay, you can kind of see it starting to come together. You can definitely see those fatty, buttery pieces in there, I think. I'm gonna do a recap of the recipe here in a second as well. And then I'm gonna pop this into the fridge, and then I'm gonna use this when I make our pie later today. We're 2-for-1 live stream today. I love that. Okay, that was definitely not enough water. So I went on the lower end. The recipe is also linked on the video. It's also in, I believe, the first comment. I'm gonna have to pour because this is risky, but I'm gonna do it this way anyways. I can ditch those. All right, so what we're gonna do now, this is 5 tablespoons of cold butter, I think. Y'all, I was trying to pay attention. I think I'm gonna need to add a little bit more. And then I'm gonna teach you the marble trick. You wanna squeeze the marble. That's the last trick I'm gonna share with you before we get this transferred into the fridge. So that's still pretty crummy. So I definitely need to add a little bit more cold water. So I'm gonna probably do maybe a half a tablespoon at a time until I get it to the consistency that I want. And then I will show you the trick. Okay, so recipe is 1 1/3 cup of flour. And then we cut in plus 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Let me start this over, sorry. Let me start with the yield, how about that? Okay, so we are making a single pie crust. So this would just be like the bottom of a pumpkin pie or the bottom of a fudge pecan pie or something like that. We are not doing, this is not a double crust. So if you needed to do an apple pie where you needed a double crust, you're gonna wanna double this. Okay. 1 1/3 cup of flour, just white all-purpose flour. If I were doing a whole wheat, I would probably do half whole wheat, half white, and then you'll have to add a teeny tiny bit extra water. All right, 1 1/3 cup of flour, okay? 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I mix that together with my pastry blender just to incorporate them both. Then we cut in 1/2 cup of cold butter. I pulled it right out of the fridge right before we started. Add a little bit more water. There's still some crummy pieces at the bottom. We cut that all together with the butter and the flour and the salt. And then we had this really nice crummy mixture. And then after that, I added 1 teaspoon of cold vinegar. And now I'm in the cold water stage. So what I do is I add water plus ice cubes into a measuring cup, and then I measure the water from there. So it's gonna take anywhere between 4, 5, 6 tablespoons, depending on, I think it really depends on how thick your little butter crummy pieces are. So now I'm just gently, very gently, I've switched from the Danish dough whisk to gently forming this together. So here's the marble trick. Let me show you this. So what I'm gonna do, I've kind of formed it right here into this little dough candy. Yes, the vinegar is crucial. I think it's crucial. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take a little bit of the crust. It's a little bit, feels a little bit wet now. You can see how it's sticky on my hands. So we're gonna roll this into like a marble size ball. That way you have different pieces of fat in there with your, with your different, with the dough, different pieces of fat. So what you're gonna do is you're going to do this. This is ready, okay? This is not flaky. There's no like flour that's fallen out of it. This is not dry. So if you make this little marble and you just give it a little squeeze, this is now ready to be transferred over to, I'm gonna do plastic wrap. You could do parchment, you could do wax paper. This is just what I grabbed from my drawer right here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just leaving my pie thing out for later today. I'm leaving it on the counter all day. So I'm gonna lay a piece of saran wrap out, and I am going to gently continue to form this in the bowl. You could transfer this whole disc onto the mat here, but I'm just gonna do it in here. Let's see, there's a few more little pieces I wanna grab from the bottom here. And then I'm gonna transfer this onto the saran wrap, and I'm gonna flatten it into a disc so that it's easier to roll out later. Then it's gonna go in the fridge for a couple hours. I'm gonna go to the gym, I'm gonna get some other work done, and then I'll be back later this afternoon, probably around 2 o'clock to do this pie. I can like see the marbling here. I don't know if you can see this. Might be hard to see with the lighting. But like you can see the fat marbling in there, and it's just magical. I'm actually gonna add like literally the tiniest touch of water. There's this one little part at the bottom here that is literally a drop that is still, That one little marble-sized ball I showed you was good to go, but there was one tiny section at the bottom there now it's all pulled together. So now it's all pulled together into this disc. Okay, and again, we're not over kneading. I'm being super gentle with this. All right, I'm gonna pull all this out, and then I'm gonna transfer. I'm gonna kind of roll it into, can you see that okay? Let me move a little closer. Roll this into, you can see the butter marbling. I just love it. Just gently forming this into a disc so that when I go to roll this out later, it just rolls really nicely. So I'm going to flatten it just a smidge, and then we need this guy to get cold. Pie crust, kind of like sugar cookie dough, needs to be cold to be worked with, okay? Again, wax paper, parchment paper, I'm just using plastic wrap because what I have. This is ready for the fridge. It's gonna be a lot easier to manipulate once it's completely chilled. So I will be back with you around 2 o'clock, and we're gonna use this crust for a pumpkin double chocolate cheesecake. I probably have made this before because it's my favorite pie, but I'm gonna make it for you again. It's super fantastic. So this is how to do homemade pie crust. I want you to save this. I want you to go over to the link. You'll see a couple of the different, I'm making it hot by holding it. This is how sensitive I am to keeping it cold. I'm not gonna even hold it anymore. I want you to go check out what we have on the website. The homemade pie crust recipe link is here in the comments on the video. It's also in the caption or description. If you're watching this later on YouTube, you can check out the link in the description as well. So that is how we do homemade pie crust, and a couple of important hacks and tips and tricks for you. I hope that's helpful for you. I wish you the very best with making pies this holiday season, and I look forward to seeing you a little bit later this afternoon when we put together the pumpkin double chocolate cheesecake pie.